For me, The King of Comedy is Martin Scorsese's best film, but I think that for him it took about 6 years to properly come together, for him to understand it. A bit like Raging Bull, it was brought to him just before filming on Taxi Driver by Robert De Niro, and he turned it down due to not connecting with the subject. He wasn't a comedian, he wasn't an actor, or in that world of entertainment, and he just couldn't find something to grab onto. And then, as with many of his films in the 80s, after struggling to get funding for either Gangs of New York or The Last Temptation of Christ, he was told, you can make it in New York, and he agreed to take the project on, replacing Michael Cimino, who wanted to focus on editing Heaven's Gate, which was, let's be honest, the reason that Scorsese couldn't get his passion projects off the ground in the first place. It was why studios basically said, you can make a Star Wars, you can make a Jaws, make these big blockbusters, but you're not going to make these personal projects, these art films. Those are off the cards now. And he was still reluctant about The King of Comedy. He still didn't entirely understand the film or what he was going to do with it. And then in the 4 months building up to it, the production and Scorsese's mindset really was shaken. If Raging Bull was a film made with anger, The King of Comedy was a film made with fear. In December 1980, as I say, just a few months before the film was going to go into production, John Lennon, one of the major figures of peace, was shot. Not long after that, there's an assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan shortly after the start of his first term. The man behind that was John Hinkley Jr, and Hinkley had modelled himself on Travis Bickle in an attempt to gain the attention and adoration of Jodie Foster. This was just a few days before the 1981 Oscars, which Scorsese then attended with security and a bulletproof vest. And it was while there that he remembered a letter that was sent to him before a previous ceremony when Taxi Driver was nominated. And it said, if little Jodie wins an Oscar for what you made her do in Taxi Driver, you will pay for it with your life. This is no joke. And it turned out that letter was also from Hinkley, and that alongside a number of people. He had plenty of perfectly pleasant conversations and interactions with people. But he also had a number of points where he'd be in a lift and someone would turn to him and say, oh, Travis Bickle, what a guy. They were identifying with him, really connecting with him. And that scared Scorsese, and he began to isolate himself. Already more than he was, he'd already spent a number of years pushing people away from him. And I think all of this gives the dark comedy of the film even more of a sinister edge. Without it, this could be quite a different film, even more different to the version that was considered by Bob Fosse to star Andy Kaufman in the lead role, a film that I would love to see. It would also be different to the versions of the film where the Jerry Lewis role would possibly be played by Dick Cavett, Orson Welles, or any of the Rat Pack. They were each individually considered. Johnny Carson was offered the role, and he himself at the time was the kingmaker. If you appeared on The Tonight Show, almost all of America was tuning in at 11:30 each night because seemingly they didn't have work the next morning, but they were tuning in, and if you had a slot on that show, you were overnight sensation. Everyone knew who you were. If you then got invited to speak at Johnny's desk after your routine, you were famous for the rest of your life. And Carson said in response to being offered the role, he said, you know that one take is enough for me. In the end, most scenes in the film took around 35 takes, a level that Scorsese had rarely hit before or since. The scenes of Jerry Lewis, cast for being an all-round entertainer, he tackled late-night Broadway movies. Him walking down the street with people calling out his name were either genuine responses captured by hidden cameras, or in the case of one woman on a phone, you'll know exactly when you see it, was inspired by a genuine interaction he had when going to the stage to perform in Vegas. It was because he knew he'd get this response when filming the external scenes in New York that Lewis suggested that the character's name be changed from Robert to Jerry. Meanwhile, to get into the role of Rupert Pupkin, Robert De Niro had, alongside analysing the rhythms and routines of different comedians, he was facing his own long-time stalker situations, and so did the logical thing and arranged to meet one of them over dinner and ask questions. He also, for autograph hunters, would ask for their autograph in return, and also stalk them. Having first been presented to Scorsese before Taxi Driver and undoubtedly formed after it, there are a lot of similarities in both films. And in fact, Scorsese has claimed that the violence in them is the same, particularly when it comes to the kidnapping scenes and how Rupert finally executes his plan to get onto Jerry's show. It reminds me, there's a great quote. Thelma Schoonmaker, Scorsese's longtime editor, they've worked on pretty much all of his films together. As she was once asked, how can such a nice lady like you edit such violent movies? And her response was, but those films aren't violent until I've edited them. I realise I've spoken about this film like it's a deep, dark, intense study, which it is, but it is also a very funny film. Film is subjective. We can all see very different things in it. De Niro went into it, he wanted to make a comedy with Scorsese. They'd done a musical with New York, New York. They'd done a number of dramatic films. Meanwhile, the director says that this is, while a film with laughs, it's not a comedy. But I think there are undoubtedly funny moments in it. The shouts from Rupert's mum asking him to keep the noise down while he rehearses, contrasted with one of my favourite shots in any film is in this film. It's the one where Rupert's practicing his routine that he's going to do on Jerry's show, and he's doing it to this wall of black and white faces in hysterics, and his whole world is black and white. It should be that simple, and a plan that can easily be translated to the real world. It should be easy enough. And the camera pans back to show his tunnel vision. There's something really quite sinister about that moment. I love that shot. I can't wait to see it on the big screen. I should also mention Sandra Bernhardt as Masha, a brilliant performance. I love her in this film. This gloriously unhinged stream of consciousness performance. Her character is totally wrapped up in the relationship between host and viewer, but there's no longer the divide of screen or camera. I believe a lot of her stuff in this film was improvised. As I say, I love her in this film. She's brilliant. Scorsese has cited the film Station 6 Sahara as an inspiration for this, which is a really good film, well worth checking out. A group of men working an oil station in the middle of the desert, and suddenly Carol Baker turns up and tensions start to rise. He's described the film as bitterly funny. Every laugh is on the knife edge of desperation and despair. And despite that rising tension, the heat that's intensifying, there is occasional amusement to the unspoken competition on display. Another influence was Don Rickles, who would later appear in Casino. The humour of nastiness, that coming from other people's problems. When explaining to himself in some way how he comes up with his material, Rupert says, "I think it's that I look at my whole life and I see the awful, terrible things in my life and I turn it into something funny." In an interview promoting the film, Jerry Lewis would say about his avoidance of therapy, "If I find out what's bothering me, I won't be funny anymore." Scorsese, who, amongst exhaustion, illness, and a struggling connection to what he was making, said the shoot, which he often showed up late to, he'd show up around 4 p.m. most of the time, was grueling for me, because I didn't know how else to go through it except through Rupert and Jerry and some of Masha too, and so I was very upset by the picture. He got through it by living through the fantasies of the imagined life of the celebrity, and also the truth of the celebrity life. After around 90 days or so, he realised I better show up on time from now on because I've still got to go through it. Much like the world around him, I think it took Scorsese some time to properly embrace the king of comedy, but it has grown some cult appeal. It has grown a following over the years, a bit like After Hours has. And certainly he's talked about it more than other films of his. It's not exactly like he's going out and doing Q&As for Bringing Out the Dead, which is an interesting film. If you've not seen it, it's a much less talked about Scorsese film. In between Kundun and Gangs of New York, he released just this kind of small little kind of horror film. Nicolas Cage as an ambulance driver. There are bits of Shutter Island in there, stuff that he did in Cape Fear as well. It's a interesting film in his filmography, definitely. But as I say, he's not really speaking about that as much. It's not to say that it's a bad film. Again, certainly an interesting film in his filmography, and it's one that I like. But he certainly embraced and talked about the king of comedy a lot more, maybe because he's probably just asked about it. But at the time, named flop of the year, flopped at the box office. We embraced it in the UK, though. It was a success here. It got BAFTA nominations, including for Best Film. But I think Scorsese needed that time to reflect on what the film was reflecting without those personal weights that he was carrying during production. And as I said at the start, I personally think that this is his best film. I love it. It's definitely grown that following in recent years and found itself... I tried to find a better ending. I apologise for this sentence. Definitely found itself with a reputation far from schmuck for a lifetime. And so with that, please everybody sit back, relax and enjoy The King of Comedy.